Here another opportunity for public to speak. Please come forward, identify your name, and have 3 minutes to speak. No?
My name is Paul Long. I live at 1410 Grady Avenue, and I should have left a little bit a while ago. I'm tired. But I wanted to stay and address the issue that was talked about, the resolution as far as marijuana. And as Ms. Gavin said, this indeed should be a bully pulpit for discussion on how we deal with people who have drug addiction problems. I think the discussion should encompass all drug abuse, whether it's marijuana, cocaine, amphetamines, alcohol, whatever. And Mayor Huger mentioned, well, what kind of message are we sending our children? I've called for the decriminalization of all drug use. And I think that the message that I'm calling for is that there's nothing, people have different coping mechanisms. And some people, as they go through life, one of their coping mechanisms is to abuse drugs. There's a variety of reasons why they do that, and we can read a lot of literature that tries to explain that. But I think what society needs to tell people is that if you are suffering from a drug addiction to whatever drug, it's nothing to be ashamed of. In the same sense that if you have cancer, if you have high blood pressure or diabetes, you wouldn't be ashamed to go seek medical attention for that. I want to make a distinction between calling for decriminalization and legalization, because when I ran for city council and was calling for decriminalization, there's a difference. I'm not saying legalize it. It's not like you can go down to your local grocery store and buy marijuana or crack cocaine or whatever. What I'm saying is that if a person gets stopped merely with possession of drugs in their pocket for any reason whatsoever, they're not going to go to jail for that, and they're not going to go to prison for that. A lot of lives have been destroyed by drug use. I think that there is recovery. I wish that Chris Winters was still here, because he's done a lot of good in the community as far as reaching out to addicts who are seeking help. But we have to look differently at it, at the whole problem. It's nothing to be ashamed of. And as been noted by Mr. Fogg and many other people, the war on drugs in the last 40 years has been a colossal failure. When I was a small child, I remember watching The Untouchables on television, which was about Elliot Ness during the time when alcohol was outlawed. That didn't stop alcohol abuse. The last 40 years, throwing people in prison and jail doesn't keep them from using drugs. I have a good friend of mine who's been incarcerated many times. He's not afraid of prison and he's not afraid of jail. He needs treatment, not imprisonment and not jail time. We have to look at it that way, and we have to use the local level. As I realize City Council has no control of that. These decisions are being made in Richmond and the Capitol in Washington, D.C., but the voices for reform and change have to come from the local issue. I never thought that I would agree with Gary Wills and Pat Robinson, both of whom were on the conservative side, and if they knew who I was, probably wouldn't want to have anything to do with me. But they have both called for decriminalizing drug use. The late William F. Buckley did the same thing, and a former mayor of Baltimore, I don't know whether he's alive or not, Carl Schultz, who before becoming mayor of Baltimore was a federal prosecutor, back in the 70s and 80s, was calling for the same thing. The support for decriminalizing crosses ideological barriers, crosses political parties. It's time to decriminalize drug use and look upon it as a public health issue, which is what it is.
Okay.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much.
How you doing, Council, Mayor? My name is Matthew Fogg, and I am retired Chief Deputy United States Marshal with 32 years of service. Here speaking on behalf of law enforcement against prohibition. We're about 60,000 supporters around the country, judges, lawyers, prosecutors, police officers, former and current police officers. The reason why I'm here testifying is because, of course, you passed the law deprioritizing marijuana. But I would like to look at the bigger picture. Myself, I was led a drug enforcement task force for several years, Metropolitan Area Task Force. We did drug interdiction all over the country. And one of the biggest things that we've come to the conclusion as law enforcement officers, we've come to the reality that, of course, the war on drugs hasn't had no impact other than the fact that the dangerous fallout that it has created. Just like alcohol prohibition, we came to the realization that as long as you make it illegal, it's going to create a black market. That's been said up here. So I don't want to go over that with you, but one of the things about the race issue that was brought up here, I remember coming out of the academy and then joining and being assigned to the Drug Enforcement Task Force as a supervisory special agent in charge. I was cross-designated. And during this time, I remember one of the first things was told me when we started setting our drug and gun and addiction task forces up around the country, Chicago, New York, Miami. We would do these dragnets so that we could convince the public that we were doing our job. We'd go in and lock up as many folks as we can, everything moving. But the racial part came out because I noticed when we were doing our task forces, all of these inner cities we were targeting, we were mainly targeting inner city urban youth. So I asked a question one day to a special agent in charge. I said, listen, don't they use drugs out in Potomac, some of the more affluent areas of America? And I'm sure you guys understand they do use drugs there. Matter of fact, according to the crime control statistics, they use them more in the affluent areas. They're more accessible. But the problem was, you know what he told me? He says, Fogg, you know what? He said, listen, if we go out there and start locking those folks up, because we know where they are, we can target them, we can go get them. He says, but if we go start locking those folks up, he said, you know what's going to happen? He says, we're going to get that phone call. He says, because they know judges, they know lawyers, they know politicians. He says, and they're going to shut our operation down. And you know what's going to happen to us? He said, there goes your overtime. You see, what I've learned in law enforcement is this. I can stop a car with 4 whites in the car, and I can stop a car with 4 blacks in the car. I know whatever I say those blacks did, that system behind me is going to back me up. I know when I say what those white folks did, somebody might say to me, well, what was your probable cause? What was your reason? I may get scrutinized. We all on the job. Everybody knows that. The supervisor, you know what he told me? He says, man, just go to the weakest link. We're all making money. We're doing well. Let's do that. And then I begin to see there was a culture in place. So what I'm saying is when we look at these disparities, we already know the disparities. These horrible disparities exist because of the culture that's in place, because everyone wants to build their system. So what I'm just letting you know, I just wanted to say to you that until we address the culture, until we address it, I would say, yes, decriminalize it. I would say make it, because the bottom line, it is a serious disparity, and that's the reason why we see these numbers that Cheryl Alexander, and I'm closing, Cheryl Alexander's book said in the new Jim Crow, there are more today African Americans in the criminal justice system either on parole, probation, or doing time than there were slaves at the time of the Civil War. Thank you very much.